Hey there. Welcome to History Chats. Want to hear a secret? Or see a secret, I guess? Um, I thought it'd be kind of interesting to talk about, start in the recording space here before we get into the topic for today. And just start with an interesting little tidbit here. I don't know if anybody's ever noticed this, but there's actually a door behind me. There's hinges. Now, this space that we record in has gone through some different changes over the years. And one of the things was this door was added. And I thought, you know, why not start by showing that off? Want to see what's on the other side? It's an exhibit, kind of. This is part of the exhibit. This is the Preserved for Generations, which is our current exhibit up on the second floor space of the Woodson History Center. Now, this originally recording would be in the closet kind of area off the master bedroom. This would have been the edge of the house when they originally built the house, right? And over the years, when they added on, this window got pulled out. Later, we removed the wall that was put in place. They bricked this up and opened it up and started to repurpose it as an exhibit space. So by putting a pane of glass in front, it's not a window in the sense that it's like not a built-in that you would have in your home or what other places, an outside, like a window for the outdoors to the inn. But by putting this hinge on here and the pane of glass, we can put shelves and we can kind of, make a display case. Which is kind of an elegant way to use the space while also keeping the history of this. This is from Preserve for Generations, which is our parks exhibit on the county park system. In this case, we decided to create a little scene like the dance band looking into Vogel's Park, which is little dance pavilion and resort up near the adjoining, and now the grounds are part of the Dells of the Eau Claire Park. But it's kind of an interesting little thing here. So by looking through the window, you can see the band. We put some glasses of people setting it down, and maybe outside having a cigarette break or catching up on a book. Kind of a fun thing. I thought today, rather than do a behind the scenes look at an exhibit's thing in an exhibit like we've been doing with Peek Inside, rather than talk about this window case specifically for the whole time, I thought it would be really interesting to talk about the larger exhibit space that this is in. The second floor space here is, well, it's awkward. It's probably one of the most awkward spaces that you could hope to build an exhibit for. There's worse places, certainly, and it works, but it is awkward as heck. And the reasons why it's awkward are really interesting, because the more that I thought about it, the more that I realized it was a byproduct of nobody designed this to be awkward. Nobody went and decided, hey, well, what if we just had a wall that was brick that we can't attach things to? Or what if we put entrance points at different points in the sides of the, different sides of the room? But there's a lot of reasons why this is very awkward, but it's always a byproduct of the larger history of the building. And so I thought today, let's dig into that. Let's look at the story of why this is an awkward exhibit space to design for, examples, and how that all comes to be. We're doing some history. Let's start with some history. It's usually a good place to start, right? Let's do that. Okay, so this house has sort of three major eras that we can look at. There is the original home, the Woodson home, is built in 1914 by the Yawkey family, lived across the street. Cyrus and Ellis had a daughter named Lee. She had gotten married a few years earlier to a guy named A.P. Woodson. That's him up there. Woodson was a lawyer from out of state, so they missed their daughter, and the couple was expecting their first child in 1914. And so, like any grandparents, they were like, hey, it'd be really great if you moved back to be close to us. And in the case, that's a natural, I think, inclination. But if you're the Yankees, you can hire George Mayer to build an amazing house. And that's what they did. And apparently it was given to them over Thanksgiving dinner. And then they moved in 1914 and spent the rest of the next couple decades living and raising their family here, right? By 1956, though, they've decided by this point to move up onto the hill, build a new building, a new home on Highland Park Boulevard. And they give this building then to the Emmanuel Baptist Church, right? Sell it to them. So the property then, the Baptist Church already has a church and a parsonage, and but they're growing and they need a place, initially, and who knows if the intention was always to build more onto it, but initially the intention was to just have it be used for Sunday school and Christian education purposes. That's what they called it. So by 1957, they are starting to use it as such after a couple, some renovations and bringing it up to code and all of that. But by the end of the 1950s, they appear to have decided that they want everything kind of centralized. And so at 1962, after, soliciting some designs and raising some money, they break ground for to add on. They buy the rest of the property to the north up to Fulton Street, and then they add on the sanctuary and the rest of the sort of concentrating the rest of the build, the Emmanuel Baptist Church. Now it's in one place. And it's a pretty modern, mid-century modern looking building. It's a pretty cool addition. Thankfully, they decided to keep the original building, what they're calling now Woodson Hall, intact for the most part. Of course, they did some renovations to make it useful, and they took down some bits, windows and doors and things like that, in order to make it useful. But for this, is the second era here, you have the Woodson Hall and the church. They continue for the next 3 decades until 1990s. By the mid-90s, they decide, actually, we would really love to be able to for a variety of reasons. They want to build a new building. Parking is difficult. This is maybe not the best structure for what they need to do in the modern era. And so they, again, start to do that. And so they sell the building to the Historical Society. 1995. We've been across the street since the 50s as well. The Yankees, of course, when Alice dies in 1953, the family, Lee decides to donate that building to the Historical Society, which becomes our home. But we've outgrown the space. It is useful for what we had, but by the 1980s and 90s, particularly like our collection storage and our research library is awkward, and we were really adequately able to do what we needed to do to preserve it. So we thankfully get this building. We start to move things across. The living room here was our library, no longer on the 3rd floor of the Yawkey House. We start to move in collection storage. We can actually keep track of things and properly process and store them. Over the next 10 years, we start to move towards this idea of turning the Yawkey House into a historic home museum, and so everything gets moved over. After the church is finally out, they dedicate their new building, and they're fully moved out by 1997. So we get the building. We start moving our exhibit spaces, our offices, all of our collections over, restore the Yawkey House back to being, this time capsule of what it was like in 1910 or so, and this becomes the History Center. And so we have these 3 distinct eras, and of course each of them have their own challenges and things that go along with them. But I think ultimately, the really the second floor space that gets added, that is now the exhibit, that little awkward space. It's not awkward necessarily because of how the church treats it or how we are using it. It's because of these sort of intermediate places. It's the transitions between these 3 eras that are important, I would say. So let's take a look at specifically how that all comes to be. Okay. So let's look at some blueprints and architectural drawings. I think they will give sort of an idea of the awkwardness. I wanted to get a sense of what was the space actually used for, specifically during the church era, because they're the ones that added on the space to the original building, and we've sort of had to repurpose the space, but what was the original intention? Now we do have some architectural drawings and blueprints going back to 1914 and the original Mayer design. not super useful for this because obviously it didn't exist at that point. But we do also have some from the church, specifically when the Emmanuel Baptist Church was looking for proposals to design the building. There's an interesting tube of drawings showing some what-ifs and sort of attempts to try to graft this modern, mid-century modern-looking church to a original home. And there's some interesting designs. What they ultimately end up doing, which is this, this is the as far as I know, the designs that they ended up going with. These were put out by Donald Chupke, who I believe local architect. Obviously, there's a couple pages here. We're just mainly looking at this one here because it shows some of the important bits. Specifically, you can see the roof plan here, and then what they're calling the balcony floor plan. And there's some other stuff here. And of course, if we were to look at some of the other pages, you would see the first floor and the basement plans. But the second floor is what we're looking at. So what was this look like? But I keep saying that it's an awkward design, specifically that space, right? And the reason it's awkward, and it's kind of it's not intentional. Like, it is put in there to accommodate the addition of the new building. So you have the existing roof line in the existing building, which is kind of squarish. It's kind of a rectangular that faces McIndoe Street. But then as you go back, there's more on the west side of the building than there is on the east, right? So it kind of goes out this way. There's some servants' quarters and kitchen and stuff on this side, whereas the main structure is where the bedrooms are. And as a consequence of that, when they wanted to add the church on, they wanted it to be this, it's not rectangular, right? You can see here that it has it kind of goes in and then out. It's not a flat ending. It's got this, triangle point at the end. But on this side, where it meets the house, it is nice and flat. In fact, you can see, so where the roof line on each side, going, east and west, the point comes down. On the south side, where it meets the house, it actually has a flat sort of edge of the gable there. And that just rises out of the ground. And then there's just this flat bit filling in between the original house roof line and the tower that they built, which kind of balances that out. And as the result of this, you have this sort of flat space in which, it's just filling in the gap. And that's kind of what I mean, right? So if we look over here, granted, by this point, they had already been using the space for, Sunday school and educational purposes. So you can kind of see what they've already decided. You have the kindergarten, the nursery, you got classrooms, tot room, I think it's tot room, and the crib room. These are all part of the bedrooms of the original home. And as they add on, so you can see this is the original stairwells here for the main family, and then the servants smaller on the side. Here's the storage room, which they're calling storage. This is the closet where the recording room is now. The new set of stairs that they add. And then there's this space. And this space is not labeled. When you look at actually the original proposals, they don't even really talk about the second floor, the new space that they create. The only thing they say is, maybe it could be a choir loft. Now, was it ever a choir loft? I don't think so. Even on the original drawings here, it just says, studs with plywood, temporary partition. So the part that overlooks into the sanctuary, or now the exhibit space, I think that was just a flat wall. Now, I think they did cut some holes to look down into it for various purposes. But the main thing is, this whole area was not designed intentionally to make that area. It is just to facilitate the rest of the building being grafted to the original home. And that is just kind of an awkward background, isn't it? And I think that it comes from the fact of the intention of having to try to make this all work. And when we got the building, we inherited this, and there's some similar issues. Okay, so during the time that the church was in here, they made some changes to the building. They did keep the original structure for the most part, but they were working, it was a working church, right? And so on the second floor, they certainly used the space for nursery and Sunday school and things like that, and similar stuff up here. When they moved out and we moved in, we, you know, also renovated it a little bit. And one of the big early focuses was also to restore it back to what it would have been as best we could, right? And we didn't go as far as a historic house museum like we did at the Yawkey House. Like, there are things that we're just never going to go back. But one of the things that, you know, as a historical society, and particularly I think the people that were, you know, involved at that point were particularly enthusiastic about historic preservation. As we got this building, which again, George Mayer designed it, it's got a lot of historical significance, connection to the Yawkey House across the street through the family. So we wanted to kind of keep the importance of the building. And so we have, over the years, restored bits and pieces of it while keeping it still functional. And so, again, we have a sort of different attitude when it comes to the space than the church did. The best example of that is actually up at the top of the stairs there, which is the stained glass window. So when the church moved in, and they added on the second and you know, the main space going down to the sanctuary, there really wasn't a great way. Like, they didn't knock any of the walls down, right? They didn't like continue the building, and for better or worse, the outside of the building is still there, right? Now, they covered it up with some drywall, so like the exposed brick, that's something that we did when we moved back in, moved in here, because we could, you know, here's the original brick outside of the building. But if you wanted to get from this, which is the front foyer, off Mackenzie Street, the main entrance of the original house, well, the actual church functions were mostly back there. And if you wanted to get up to the second floor, you know, they did put a door in what is the hallway off the exhibit space, right, from one of the bedrooms into that space. But for the most part, what you would have to do is you'd have to like go all the way to the church addition, go up that set of stairs, and then make your way this. So it made sense then to them to turn the stairwell, you know, that stained glass window at the top, which would have looked originally out into the back garden of the Yawkey, or the Woodson family, they took that out of the wall. And they actually had a staircase kind of extending up, and they put a doorway. It looks like this. Now, granted, this photograph is from probably after we took over in the 90s, so it might be a little not representative of what it was when they originally put in the door. Also worth noting that I don't think that whoever took this picture did any favors. They certainly made it look spookier than it needed to be because they didn't light the hallway that was behind it. So it just kind of looks like it's going out into the void. But you get the idea, right? That was a practical solution that made sense to them. But when we took over, right, in addition to trying to preserve the building as best we can and keep those elements that survived the years the church was using it, we also started to restore some things. Again, not going all the way back to what it was, but when we were doing this, somebody got in touch with us and was like, hey, by the way, we still have the stained glass window. Are you interested? So we were able to acquire the window, get it restored, and put it back in the wall. So we no longer have the steps going to that area. But this is kind of indicative of the challenges as the historical society takes over, right? Just as the church had to walk the line between what's functional in the Woodson home turned Woodson Hall and then adding on, we also have to kind of walk this balance. So one of the things that we were very interested in is trying to keep the integrity of the original building as best as we can. And that's a good example. This is the second set of stairs that we have in the building, also legacy of the church. When we took over the building, right, from the Emmanuel Baptist Church, now we have to return to a museum. Of course, as a historical society, as people who are interested in historic preservation, we want to keep the original building, but we also need to make this functional as a public space for people to come see exhibits and take part in events. So as we kind of settle in with the Yawkey House restoration to make it a historic house museum, we bring stuff over. We do things like turn this space into make it more user-friendly. And some of those things include things like behind the camera here. Well, here, I'll just pivot the camera. We made exhibit spaces. So this, the lobby here, so we have like our stories, right? This is our core exhibit that opened up more than a decade ago. One of the first real things, award-winning. You can see over here, and on the other side of the lobby, It goes through, that's Peek Inside, our newest exhibit as of recording. And these spaces are built into the sanctuary of the church, where the church had been. We also walled it off so we could have it, continue our collections, our artifact storage and things like that. But again, we want to make it useful, right? So when it comes to the second floor, we have some problems with that. Before we did the renovations of the lobby space here, we wanted to allow people to get to the basement, right? We had the programs of the church, we had the church community space, right, where they had different functions of various things, and meetings and dinners and all that fun stuff. It's also where the modern bathrooms are. So we need to let people get down. Now, do we need to get them up? Well, at the 2000 aughts, there's not much up on the second floor. Offices, pretty much, maybe some storage for our archives, but there's not really anything that the public needs to get access to. But we got these stairs. This is one of the few things. Now, a lot of the stuff that the church put in, we didn't necessarily carry on. We replaced them or renovated them. There's not a lot that you can see that is very clearly like this legacy of the church, at least not in the public space. This is one of the ones that is. Now, in part because it's very utilitarian and it looks cool, right? You got the staircase. But also it's, a lot of concrete and steel that would be expensive to replace, and all it would accomplish is basically limit the ability to go up. When, for those early years, we had like a divider, like a curtain here, and that just kind of kept people from going up. But as part of the renovations, we also decided we wanted an elevator. Again, back in the 1960s, they had different priorities. Maybe accessibility expectations weren't quite what they were. So people, with mobility issues or what have you, we want them to have the ability to, again, get down to the basement to our programs and space down there, or use the bathrooms, right? And if we put the elevator in, which is on the other side of the lobby here, if it's going down, it might as well go up to the second floor as well. In which case, if it opens up on the second floor and we have the stairs, that leads to the decision of, well, hey, maybe we should just make something up there for the public to be able to see. Again, I don't know if that was always the intention. We did use the second floor for like meeting spaces and programs and stuff on a smaller scale, but it wasn't necessarily open to the public when you walked in the door. But again, there's that sort of duality, right? As we take over from the Emmanuel Baptist Church, the Historical Society has different intentions and obligations and expectations, right? So one of those is, yes, we are going to remove the drywall and expose the brick because we want to illustrate the beauty of the brick and the history of the house. It also means that in doing so, maybe there's a way that people can get up and see that, nice stained glass window that we have again, and not have to go up the set of awkward stairs in the front. And that leads to the use of the second floor. Back up to the second floor in the exhibit space that we've been talking about. Now we have a better idea, and you can see some of the elements here on the second floor, right? Now that we're back here, you can see the brick face of the original building that the Woodsons put in. In fact, there's even the stained glass window at the top of the stairs that you can still see. You can't quite see because of the I-beam here, but there's the flat corrugated steel that makes up the roof here, and then you can see at the I-beam where it kind of goes up. That's where the gabled section of the sanctuary was added on. You can see some of the elements here, and I guess, as we've talked about, the focus has been on some of these other elements and not this space in particular, and so it gets a little awkward. Why is it awkward? Well, let's talk about what you want in an exhibit space when you're designing something. First and foremost, you want a good place to hang things. I don't know if it's foremost, but in this space, it is one of the lacking things, right? We've got two good walls, right? There's this one here, and there's another one on the other side of the room. They're the furthest walls that you could have in the space. They're the shortest walls in the space, but they are pretty good, right? We can hang things on them. You can screw into the drywall. You can use adhesive strips if something is a little lighter that you don't need to full-on put a screw into it. That's what we typically use, by the way, to hang things whenever possible. Can't say the same thing about the brick. The original Woodson home, this wall is, while it's great to have exposed it so that we can see the brick and we can see where the windows were and put the stained glass window back in the wall, it's not great to hang things on. We don't. because adhesive strips, they don't adhere to the surface of brick. It doesn't really work very well. And while there are screws that you can buy that are designed to go into brick, they're generally not meant to be, after a year or two, we will take this exhibit down and replace it with another one for a year or two. And you don't want to, like, on drywall, we can just fill in the screw holes and just reuse it. It's a lot harder to do that on brick. So we don't do that. We want to, this is an important part of the history of this building. We don't want to destroy it by putting lots of screws into it. So as a result, we don't. Instead, a lot of the storytelling is done through these text stands in front of things like the scenes, and we use the windows as exhibit cases where possible. So, okay, we've got 2 good walls. We've got a bad wall. What about the 4th wall? Let's turn the camera around and take a look at what that looks like. So, other side of the room, you got the elevator here. There's the same center dividing wall that we have, and you can see a bit of the side wall. But obviously, we're missing some wall here. We made up for it a little bit with a temporary wall that we just kind of put up here, because the rest of this is just a waist level wall, which is great if you want to go down and look into the exhibit space or get some light coming down, into the space. It's not so great if you want to hang things. Yeah. Elevator wall has some space, though. There's a little bit here, and there's a lot going up. But, okay, a good rule of thumb when you're designing an exhibit is you don't want people to have to look too far down or up when they're, going through. You don't really want, you want to keep things basically at your average eye level. You do not want to have them go, down here or have to look up high, because it's just not a very comfortable way to do things. And so consequently, again, not the end of the world, but it is awkward because you can't have anything on this side without creating temporary walls. So we have 2 walls that are okay. They're far away, they're not very long. We have a very long wall space that is mostly open from waist up. Now we have the elevator here. There's a little bit of space here, but you can't put anything that's integral to the exhibit narrative here, because people are going to get off the elevator and they won't look at this wall until they go back on. And obviously you don't want that to happen. Okay, so that's the walls. The other thing, though, is the elevator creates a bit of a problem because it's on the opposite side of the room from stairway. Yeah. So this is on the opposite side, again, point of view here that you're right as coming off the elevator. The stairwell is on the other side of the room, which is not a great solution. And to give you an example, the very first exhibit that I created in this space, I was volunteering back in 2013, 2014, and they were looking at, hey, we're building a medical themed exhibit, the history of medicine. So I came on and ended up kind of taking over the research and writing and design for the exhibit space in a lot of ways. Not to, Gary Gisselman and Anna Chilton-Straub helped with that, of course, too. I think Kathy and Linda did as well with some of the artifact stuff, but it was mostly text-based because that's the area that I come from. And the story of medical history is a lot of like, this happened, then this happened. Like the way that I learned it was very linear. Here's the early history, and then as you go, like the early hospitals and sort of the later hospitals and modern hospitals, sort of eventually getting to what we have today. And that, it's hard to make a scene that is like, here's an operating room from 1938. We don't really have this isn't built for that. So it tended to be very text heavy. And so I made these big panels that as you came up the stairs, here's the information, and then as you go, it kind of wrapped around. And I think it works really well. I want to be clear that even looking back now a decade later, I think I could do a much better job, especially in the space. But the exhibit was great. The information it was given across, I think it did a good job of pacing things. One of the big downsides, though, is you had to, if you came off the elevator, walk halfway through the exhibit to get to the starting point at the foot of the stairs. And that is not a great way to design things. So, lesson learned. Back in 2014 into 2015, I helped design another exhibit before I was eventually hired. And that was Generations of Progress, a manufacturing history of the county. And this space is also part of that. And that exhibit was, little histories of different companies. And that worked much better in the space because, you should be, over here we had Hammer Blow, and then there's Zimpro over there, and there's Wassa Homes, and you didn't have to read the text for Wassa Homes in order to read Hammer Blow. Like, you could go at your own pace, and that worked really well in the space. So again, these little lessons, and as we go, now I know not to have big narratives coming up. But obviously, this is a bit of a problem, having an entry point that comes up here and elevator over there, not even to mention the fact that we have to keep the corridor. Yeah, so this is, again, flat part of the roof looking along where the I-beam is. We opened up, well, the church opened up the doorway you're looking through, so you can see the stained glass window along there. That's where the stairway would come up. This would have ended, or there would have been a room here, but it would not have gone all the way around. But again, as part of the changes that we made for accessibility, having a ramp that would allow access to the front of the house is important. And that means that we can't block off this, we can't block off that. So, which is relatively minor in the long scheme of things, but it's just one more constraint in terms of what we can design around. Okay, so none of these things are completely unusable, right? Just because we don't have the greatest walls, just because the narrative structure is a little awkward, doesn't mean that we can't find ways to design around it. And we have. In particular, I would say Kathy and Linda and Russ, who are artifact curators and exhibit designers for the most part, did a pretty good job of figuring out with rural electrification a great way to do that, where they kind of separated the room with a wall going this way. Again, that wavy wall that we've come to hate, but separating the room and creating sort of a scene over here, a scene kind of mirroring it on the other side. In that case, it was, the things on a farm that you would have before electricity to do your daily, or entertain yourself or do your chores or whatever it might be, and then the equivalent on the other side with electricity. And then kind of on the brick wall there, a little scene told through text stands as well. And so the Parks exhibit, which again, I think I'm very proud of the Parks exhibit. I learned, it's a culmination of lessons that I've learned in my exhibit creation, and Kathy, Linda, and Russ have as well, sort of a collective staff here, and the exhibits that we've created for for more than a decade at this point in this space. Awkward as it might be, doesn't mean that you can't get around it. It doesn't mean that it can't be possible to tell an interesting story. As awkward as this is, there's something, I don't know, we'll see when we start getting to work developing the next exhibit to go in the space, which will be coming sometime next year in 2024. I might come around on this idea. I might not feel so strongly, but I don't know. The more I think about the space, as awkward as it is, there's something endearing about it, I think. Again, because it isn't intended to be an awkward space. It just kind of is a space. And we've decided to make exhibits in it. That being said, again, Parks exhibit is going to be up through the end of 2023. If you haven't gotten a chance to come out and see it, please do before it comes down. I do think that this is one of the best exhibits that we've created, certainly in the space, maybe amongst the entire history that I've been here. I don't know if that's entirely. It's certainly one of my favorite exhibits, and the one that I feel proudest about. So again, and it happens to be up, so that's the important part. Come out and see it if you want to. All right, so that's the, wait, hold on. There we go. That's the program that we put together today. Again, I thought it was an interesting history. I certainly learned a lot in the last, couple days putting this together, even about the building that I worked in. I think there's a lot more history of this building and the various buildings that include this building to talk about, but I think for now we'll call it there. Yeah, kind of an interesting, different take. I thought it was, a little experiment here in doing things. Honestly, pretty little too ambitious, probably in the number of things I needed to set up for this, but I think it'll be fine. And I say that now. Now I'm going to start editing all this together. So I'm sure it'll be fine. Um, yeah, we're back full circle here in the recording room, where we will be recording our live program. Starting again next week, we'll be back with the normal History Chats program. And yeah, hope you join us for that. As always, Thursdays at 12:30 live, or catch the recording anytime after that point, obviously. Anyway, thanks for watching. Yeah, see you next time. Bye.